everyone, in the previous video we write a VBA that can get these value from the first worksheet and then copy paste it or insert the value into the next sheet here into the row 2. And now in this video we want to talk about the variables. Whenever I write some data here and run my macro, I want these data be inserted into the last empty row. So how I can do that? First, I need to know the definition of the variables. If you go to your Visual Basic, we written these codes previously, and by running this macro, these data from this sheet 1 will be placed into the sheet 2. And these data from the column 2, row 1, 2, 3, 4, will be inserted into the row 2, column 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, what is the variables? Variables actually are the places in the memory of your computer, in the hard disk of your computer. This is the place that we can save whatever we want there. So there is a place in your hardware, and I want to use that place. So the first thing I have to do is to name that place that I want to use that. So for example, I want to name the number of the rows, for example, or I want to name that place the last row, or I want to name that, for example, the family name, that whatever name you want to have. The thing that you need to remember is that that name should not be the same as the names that VBA has for some functions or predefined names. For example, sheet 2, you cannot use sheet 2 as a variable name, for example. And for example, the sub is the key word in the VBA, and you cannot use this sub as the name of the variable, for example. Or for example, get value from cell. I have to rename that. I have a typo error. So this name is given by me to the sub. So I cannot use this name anymore as a variable. So you have a place in the hard disk. You name that place first for using that, and then you need to define the type of that things that you want to save in that place. So for example, right now I want to save the last empty row in the sheet 2. So the last row is the number, for example, is a 3. The last row number is 3. Or I can, for example, define the string there. For example, the name is the string or the family name, but age is a number. And the gender is a male or female. That can be just 2 variables, for example. It can be a Boolean as well. So right now, first thing I need to do is define my variable, define that I need such a place in the disk, in my hard disk, and I need to define that, I need to declare that. So for declaring the variables, you have 2 ways to do that. In the sub, you can write theme for declaring a variable and name that, define the name your variable, for example, the last row, and say that as what to type, deem this variable as an integer, for example, or as a string. We have much different variables. We can have different types. For example, here I want to have an integer. If you want to see what type of the variable you have, you can come here and search, for example, types of the variables in VBA. If you search that, you can simply see that in the first of your search there is a different type of the variables that are defined, and you can for example came here and see what kind of the variables you have. Right now we use integer, we have long, we have single, and if you define the type of the variable, you are using, for example, 1 byte of your hard disk, or if you define the integer, you will use 2 bytes of your hard disk, or if you, for example, define a single, you will find you can use 4 bytes of your hard disk. And for example, the string as well. Here are some definitions in this website. You have multiple websites that can use to see what kind of the types of the variables you can use in the VBA. We will use some of these variables in our programming course, but for more definition, please search that and see what type of the variables we can have. Right now I want to use an integer. Integer is the numbers that can be used that do not have any decimals, because here we just want to find the last row, and the last row is the integer number, for example 3, 4, 5, and we do not need to use doubles or, for example, other type of the variables. So I define my variable here. As you can see, if you define your variable in the sub, this is called the local variable. However, if you define the variable out of the sub in the above of your programming, above your module, you can define a global variable. This variable can be used in the multiple subs. For example, if I write another sub here I can use this variable as well. I can use this variable in this sub or in this sub, or other functions or sub I have in this module. But if you define this variable in the sub, you have a local variable that can just be used here in this sub. There is some needs for local variables, there are some needs for global variables. Right now I want to just define the global variables, because I may have some other subs that I want to use just this last row. When you define your variable, you are now able to set the values to the variables. I need to find the last row of my data in the sheet 2 and then place it somewhere into my variable. So how I can find my last row? I can use the for example, count function in the Excel, count A, and I can use it as a column AA, and then if I close the parentheses, you can say I have 2 values in my column A, and if I plus it with 1, I can have row 3 as my last row, empty row. So I can read this value. Just like that. For example, I can say that this last row is placed in the sheet 2 cells. What cells? In the cells row 1, column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I can say row 1 and column 6 contains the last row of my sheet 2. And then instead of using this row 2, I can use the last row. So whenever I have a value here, I count that. I will have the last empty row here, and then I get this last row. I set it into the last row variable, and then this will be row 3. And then will be used here into the sheet 2.souls. So let's run this macro and see how it works. For example, I use another person, Arash Gilani, and the age is 34, and he's a male as well. So if I run my macro, if I come here and run my macro, I will see this Arash name will be added into the last empty row, and now my last empty row is 4. So This is the one way for seeing that. And for example, if I want to see how these calculations work step by step, you can use the debug tools here. You can go to the view, use the debug. By default, you cannot see this debug. You have to go to the toolbars, checkbox the debug, and it will be added here, or you can just it may be something like this and you need to place it here. So if you press this button, the first line of your code will be run. If you use it again, it will go to another row, the next row. You can use the F8 in your keyboard key and go step by step. So right now it will set the value from this cells row 1 column 6 from sheet 2, which is the 4, to the variable right now is 3. If you press F8, this line will be run and you will see the last row is 4 right now. So this last row will be placed here. As you can see, the last row is 4. So it's saying that sheet 2.cells, the last row 4, column 1.value should be equal to the sheet 1.cells, row 1 and column 2 value. If you go to your Excel, you can see in the row 4 we have no value. If you run this line, yellow line, by pressing F8, you will see right now Arash is inserted into the row 4. So you can press this button to go to the end and you will see all data will be placed here. So in the next video, instead of using the cont A formula in the Excel and then setting the values of the variable by calling this sheet2.cells, I want to use cont A formula directly in the VBA. So instead of using the function here, I wanna have some functions here that can calculate the last empty row in the VBA directly. So until next video, goodbye. In order to watch more training videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Diako Ltd. And if you want to see our products, please visit our website, diako.co.uk.